Welcome. In today's lesson, we'll be diving into the basics of reading sheet music. Full disclaimer, you don't need to know how to read sheet music in order to play piano, and in fact, I've never been particularly good at sight reading. However, learning the basics of how sheet music works can help to build a fundamental understanding of music and rhythm. So let's start by talking about the staff. The staff is made up of 5 lines and 4 spaces, and is the foundation of written music. Each line and space represents a different note, and the note each line or space represents depends on the clef that is written at the beginning of the staff. There are multiple types of clefs, but the most common are treble and bass. The treble clef is also known as the G clef, and it centers around the G line. The treble clef is used for high-pitched notes. Remember that the 4 spaces inside the treble clef spell out the word face, if you read them from bottom to top. And the lines just represent the notes between those letters. The bass clef is also known as the F clef, and it wraps around the F line. The bass clef is used for low-pitch notes, and you can remember the order of the notes by remembering Ace G is in the spaces. And again, you can fill out the lines using the notes between those. The note directly between the staffs is the same as the middle C on your keyboard. So the treble clef octaves are up here, and the bass clef octaves are down here. You might notice that notes outside of the staff have lines through or below them. These are called ledger lines, and they're helpful to visualize what the staff would look like if it continued upwards or downwards. And to read them, you just continue reading like you would before. Just keep going up the notes. After the clef, there might be a bunch of sharps or flats. This is called your key signature. These sharps and flats will be resting on the line or space that they affect. For example, in G major, the sharp will be in the F line, representing that all Fs will be sharp in a piece of music unless otherwise specified. We write music on the staff using notes, and the different kinds of notes tell us what rhythms to play. A whole note is marked by an open oval shape and is worth 4 beats. A half note is marked by an open oval with a stem added onto it, and is worth 2 beats. A quarter note is marked by a filled oval with a stem on it, and it is worth 1 beat. From here on, to continue having the amount of beats that you have, you just add a little flag onto the end. So an 8th note has 1 flag, a 16th note has 2, and so on and so forth. You might also see notes with a dot after it. That means that the note is worth 1.5 of its original length. For example, a dotted half would be worth 1/2 note and then a quarter note, or 3 beats. A dotted quarter note would be worth a quarter plus an 1/8, so it would be 1.5 beats. When no note should be playing, we mark it with a rest. Rests also have values that relate to the length that they should be held, and follow the same naming scheme as notes. We also divide a piece of music up into bars, and each bar is worth the same amount of time. And the way we know how many notes fit into each bar is by using a time signature. The time signature is the 2 numbers at the beginning of the staff, and it tells you how many of each note are in a bar. 4/4 means that there are 4 quarter notes per bar, 6/8 means that there are 6/8 notes per bar, and so on and so forth. You use whatever the bottom number in the time signature is to count the beat, and you can count through each bar by counting how many beats you have with even timing. So in 4/4, you could count 4 quarter notes, or 4 beats per bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. And to count 8th notes in 4/4, you could put and in between each number. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. In 6/8, you have 6 8th notes per bar, or 6 beats per bar, so you can count to 6, using each 8th note as a beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There will usually also be lots of other little marks that signal other things in the sheet music. These are usually less important for reading, but are important to understand the way the composer intended the piece to be played. Some important and very notable examples are things like dynamic marks, crescendo, decrescendo, accents, staccato, fermatas, octavas, and repeats. Dynamic marks range from pianissimo to pianissimo, to piano, to mezzo piano, to mezzo forte, to fortissimo, to fortissimo. And yes, as ridiculous as this sounds, it's basically just a scale of soft to loud. Pianissimo meaning very, very soft, and fortissimo meaning very, very loud. You might also find some long sideways triangle-looking things that are between the two sets of dynamic marks. This just means that you should slowly increase or decrease the volume, depending on which way the dynamic marks are. An accent looks like a little crescendo, except a little shorter, and it's below the individual note, and it tells you that that specific note is supposed to be played with more emphasis than the other notes on the page. Staccatos are another mark you may see, and you might confuse them for dotted notes, like we discussed before. However, instead of the dot being to the right of the note, it will be directly above or below it. A staccato just tells you to play a note very short, followed by a little bit of silence before the next note comes in, instead of holding it out for its full length. A fermata is a symbol that you will see on top of the staff. It looks like a dot with a semicircle on top of it, and it tells you to hold out the note that you're on for longer than the written length. Exactly how long you hold it is up to your interpretation, and there's no standardized amount of time to hold a fermata for. An octava, written 8VA, signals to the player to play the music either an octave up, if written above the staff, or an octave down, if written below. You only play in the separate octave for the length of the octava's marking, or as long as the dashed lines tell you. Then, once it ends, you return to the normal octave of the piece. And the last symbol I'll be going over today is the repeat. A repeat is kind of like a loop that you play through once. It will have a start point and an end point. Both will look like a thicker bar line with two dots on the inside of the loop, and the first time you reach the start point, you don't need to do anything but remember the spot you'll be jumping back to later. Once you reach the end point, you will jump back to the start point of the loop, not the entire piece, unless there is no start point on the repeat, and play the piece out from there. Once you repeat, you don't repeat again. Again, if there is no start point for the repeat, that is, there's no two dots on the right side of a bar line, then you're expected to play the piece from the beginning. Now that you know the basics of time signature, key signature, and a few other common markings, you can use this knowledge to start reading sheet music. Now remember, you're not going to be perfect at first, and the only way you're going to improve is if you actually practice putting this knowledge into use on a daily basis. And if you're no good at reading sheet music, don't worry, there's tons of other methods you can use to playing piano, and this series will mainly be focusing on those rather than reading sheet music. As always, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them, and if you want more content like this, subscribe. Thanks for watching.